My parents criticized me for living without children, but when my niece was placed in foster care, they didn't care at all. Hi Reddit. I need to get this off my chest because I'm feeling cornered and drained. I'm Amanda, 42, happily child-free, and I thought I'd made peace with my life choices, until my family decided to turn my lack of children into their favorite topic of discussion. Let me set the stage. My extended family is huge. Think big Thanksgiving dinners where someone inevitably cries. It's not just immediate relatives. There are cousins, their kids, and occasionally even a random neighbor roped into the chaos. My cousin Jessica, 39, is the ringleader of this baby brigade. She has 5 kids, yes, 5, ranging from a toddler who's still in diapers to a moody teen who'd rather be anywhere else. Jessica's energy is unmatched. At every family gathering, she somehow finds a way to turn the conversation back to herself and her kids. It doesn't matter if we're talking about world events or someone else's promotion at work. Jessica will interject with, well, when you have 5 kids, you just don't have time for that. And God forbid anyone mentions parenting struggles. She'll chime in with, oh, you think one is hard? Try 5. It's her way of reminding us all that she's the queen of multitasking and self-sacrifice. For years, I'd been able to laugh off her superiority complex. But recently, it's escalated, and I feel like I'm her personal punching bag. Every time I walk through the door, it's like a spotlight turns on me. Jessica always starts with the same faux-friendly question. So, Amanda, any big life news? Life news is code for, are you pregnant yet? The answer is always no, and I'm always met with a pitying look, as if I've just announced I have 3 weeks to live. This past Thanksgiving, things hit a boiling point. I arrived with a bottle of wine and my boyfriend Liam, who's been my rock for the last 5 years. We're not married, and we're both firm about not wanting kids. As soon as we walked in, Jessica made a beeline for us. Amanda, Liam, so good to see you. I was just telling Mom how it's such a shame you two haven't started a family yet. I forced a smile. Nice to see you too, Jess. How are the kids? She didn't miss a beat. Oh, they're perfect. I mean, little Tommy's been a handful, but that's what parenting is, right? Chaos and joy. You'd know if. Liam cut her off, thank God. We actually just got back from a hiking trip in Colorado. The views were stunning. Jessica blinked, clearly confused by a conversation that didn't revolve around babies. But before she could recover, my Aunt Carol swooped in. Carol is another card-carrying member of the Why Doesn't Amanda Have Kids? Club. She's 68, retired, and convinced that a woman's only true purpose is to raise a family. Amanda, honey, she cooed, you're not getting any younger. When are you going to give your poor mother some grandchildren? My mom, bless her, tried to intervene. Carol, let's not do this today. But Carol wasn't backing down. I'm just saying it's a shame. Amanda's such a pretty girl. It's such a waste. I tried to keep my cool, but Jessica wasn't done. It's not just about age, she said, smiling like she was about to drop some wisdom. It's about fulfillment. I can't imagine my life without my kids. Sure, it's hard, but it's worth it. Amanda, what do you even do with all that free time? Liam squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder to stay calm. Well, Jess, I work full-time, travel, volunteer, and, oh, yeah, enjoy my life. That didn't land well. Jessica huffed, clearly annoyed that I wasn't taking her bait. She turned to Liam. Liam, don't you want kids? Or is it Amanda holding you back? It was like a record scratch. The room got so quiet. You could hear the toddler in the corner chewing on a crayon. Liam stayed composed. Actually, we're on the same page. We're very happy with our lives the way they are. Jessica looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Well, I just can't imagine anyone being happy without children. After dinner, when the wine was flowing and people started to relax, I overheard Jessica talking to her mom. Amanda's just selfish, she whispered, not realizing I was within earshot. She doesn't want kids because she's afraid of losing her figure. Liam could do so much better. I was stunned. I didn't confront her right then and there. I didn't want to cause a scene, but the words stuck with me. That night, as Liam and I drove home, I broke down. Why do they hate me so much? I asked him, why is it so hard for them to accept my choices? They don't hate you, he said, trying to reassure me. They just don't understand that not everyone wants the same life they have. At Christmas, things escalated even further. Jessica brought me a gift in front of everyone. A framed photo of her kids with a note that said, "Because you don't have any of your own to cherish." I felt like I'd been slapped. I wanted to throw the frame across the room, but instead, I set it down and excused myself. That's when my cousin Nathan, Jessica's younger brother, pulled me aside. "Hey, I saw that," he said. "That was messed up. You don't deserve that." Nathan's been the one family member who's always had my back. He's child-free by choice too, but he somehow escapes the judgment I face. Maybe because he's a man, or maybe because Jessica doesn't see him as competition. "Don't let her get to you," he said. "She's just bitter because she's drowning in diapers and can't admit it." It was a small comfort, but it didn't erase the humiliation I felt. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Jessica's husband, Mark. He never calls me, so I thought something was wrong. "Amanda," he said hesitantly, "I need to apologize for Jessica. She's been out of line with you." I was floored. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Mark hesitated. "Because she's not as happy as she pretends to be. She's overwhelmed, and instead of dealing with it, she's taking it out on you." It was a shocking revelation, but it didn't erase the damage. I told him I appreciated the call, but that Jessica needed to own up to her behavior. Whether she ever will remains to be seen. Hey Reddit, it's me again. If you read my last post, you know I've had my fair share of family drama. Well, things just got way more complicated, and honestly, I don't even know how to process this. A few days ago, I got an unexpected phone call from a social worker named Anna Miller. She said she was trying to get in touch with family members of a 13-year-old girl named Lisa. The name hit me like a truck. Lisa is my niece, the daughter of my younger sister Emily. The thing is, I hadn't heard from Emily in years. The last I knew, she was struggling with addiction and had cut off contact with pretty much everyone. Anna explained that Lisa was in the foster care system and had been for nearly 3 years. 3 years? I repeated, stunned. How is that possible? Why wasn't I contacted before now? Anna paused. From what I understand, the state wasn't able to locate any immediate family at the time Lisa entered the system. Emily's whereabouts are still unknown. I could barely process what she was saying. What about my parents? Or my other sister, Jessica? Yes, that Jessica. Surely someone must have known. Anna hesitated again. Lisa's caseworker did reach out to your parents initially, but they declined to take her in. I can't speak to why. My heart sank. My parents, Lisa's grandparents, had refused to help her? I didn't even know that was an option. Why are you calling me now? I asked, my voice shaking. Lisa recently expressed a desire to reconnect with her family, Anna said gently. She mentioned your name specifically. As soon as I hung up, I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring. Amanda, how are you? Sweetheart. Not great, I said bluntly. Why didn't you tell me Lisa was in foster care? There was a long pause, and then a sigh. I didn't think it was your burden to bear. My burden? I snapped. She's family, Mom. A child. How could you just let her go like that? We didn't have a choice, she said defensively. Your father and I are too old to raise a teenager, and Jessica already has her hands full. Besides, we thought Emily might come back eventually. Emily's been gone for years. Did you really think she was just going to waltz back in and play Mom of the Year? My mom didn't respond. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. I spent the next day obsessing over Lisa's situation. I couldn't stop picturing her alone in some stranger's house, wondering why her family had abandoned her. I called Anna back and asked if I could meet Lisa. She was hesitant at first, but after some convincing, she agreed to arrange a supervised visit. That Saturday, I drove to the foster home where Lisa was staying. My stomach was in knots the entire ride. I kept wondering what I'd say to her. Would she even remember me? Would she hate me for not being there sooner? When I arrived, Anna greeted me at the door. Lisa's in the living room, she said. She's a little nervous, but excited to see you. I walked in and saw a tall, skinny girl with long brown hair sitting on the couch. She looked so much like Emily at that age that I nearly started crying. Lisa, I said softly. She looked up, her eyes wide. Aunt Amanda? I nodded, and she ran into my arms. I missed you, she whispered. I missed you too, I said, even though I felt like a liar. How could I have missed her when I didn't even know where she was? Over the next hour, Lisa told me everything. She'd been living with different foster families since she was 10, after Emily disappeared one night and never came back. At first, I thought she'd just gone out to get food or something, Lisa said, her voice shaking. But then a day passed, and then a week. The neighbors called CPS, and that was it. I wanted to scream. How could Emily do this to her own child? How could my family let this happen without telling me? Did you ever hear from her? I asked. Lisa shook her head. Not once. I promised her I'd do whatever I could to make things right. You're not alone anymore, Lisa, I said. I'm here now. When I got home, I decided to confront Jessica. I wasn't looking forward to it. Jessica and I hadn't exactly been on good terms lately, but I needed answers. I called her and didn't bother with pleasantries. Why didn't you tell me about Lisa? Jessica sighed. Amanda, I've got 5 kids of my own. I couldn't take her in. And honestly, I didn't think you'd want the responsibility either. Are you kidding me? I shouted. You had no right to make that decision for me. I was trying to protect you, she said, but her tone was defensive. Raising a kid is hard, Amanda. You don't know what you're getting into. That's not your call to make. I snapped. You let Lisa think no one in her family cared about her. Do you have any idea how cruel that is? Jessica didn't respond, and I hung up in frustration. After my visit with Lisa, I couldn't stop thinking about Emily. Where was she? Was she even alive? I decided to hire a private investigator to track her down. It felt like a long shot, but I had to try. 3 weeks later, I got a call from the PI. We found her, he said. She's in a rehab facility in Phoenix. My heart raced. Is she okay? She's stable, he said, but she's not ready to see anyone. I debated whether to tell Lisa. On the one hand, I didn't want to give her false hope. On the other hand, she deserved to know the truth. In the end, I decided to wait until I had more information. Meanwhile, I started the process of becoming Lisa's legal guardian. It wasn't easy. There were background checks, home inspections, and endless paperwork, but I was determined to bring her home. My boyfriend Liam was incredibly supportive, even though it meant our lives were about to change dramatically. Are you sure you're ready for this? He asked one night as we were filling out yet another stack of forms. No, I admitted, but I'm not going to let her down. After months of navigating the system, I was finally approved to take Lisa in. The first night she stayed with me was surreal. She walked around the house, touching everything like she couldn't believe it was real. This is my room, she asked, peeking into the spare bedroom I'd turned into her space. Yep, I said. All yours. She smiled for the first time since I'd met her. Thank you, she said quietly. I knew we had a long road ahead, but in that moment, I felt like we were going to be okay. Reddit, I don't know what the future holds, but I'm doing my best. If anyone has advice on helping a teenager adjust to a new home, I'm all ears. Taking in Lisa wasn't a decision I made lightly. After my initial meeting with her and the revelation that my family had chosen to ignore her plight, I knew I couldn't let her continue to feel abandoned. It wasn't fair. She was just a kid, and none of this was her fault. After my conversation with Anna, the social worker, I started doing my homework. I spent hours reading about the foster care system and what it would take to become Lisa's guardian. It wasn't just paperwork. It was the emotional and logistical weight of raising a teenager who'd already been through so much. But every time I thought about the alternative, Lisa feeling like she had no one, it fueled my determination. When I called Lisa to tell her I wanted to take her in, her response shattered me. You really want me? She asked, her voice small and unsure. I choked up but managed to respond. Of course I do. You're my niece, Lisa. You deserve to be with family. She was quiet for a moment before whispering. No one's ever said that to me before. That was it. From that moment on, I knew I wouldn't stop until she was home with me. My first hurdle was convincing the caseworker and the system that I was fit to be Lisa's guardian. I had a stable job, a supportive partner in Liam, and enough space in my house for Lisa to have her own room. But the process wasn't as straightforward as I'd hoped. Anna explained that because Lisa had been in the system for so long, they'd need to ensure I was fully prepared to take on the responsibility. That meant home visits, interviews, and background checks. It felt invasive, but I understood why they had to be thorough. This was about Lisa's safety, after all. The home visits were nerve-wracking. Anna showed up with another caseworker, a tall man named Brian who had a no-nonsense demeanor. They inspected everything: my kitchen, the safety of the stairs, even the locks on the windows. At one point, Brian asked, "What would you do if Lisa acted out or refused to follow your rules?" I froze for a moment, not expecting the question. "I'd talk to her," I said finally. "Find out what's really going on. She's been through so much already. I don't think punishment is the answer." Brian raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Later, Anna pulled me aside and said, "That was a good answer. Lisa needs someone who will listen, not just discipline her." Despite the stress of the process, Lisa and I grew closer during our supervised visits. I learned more about her love for drawing, her fascination with marine life, and her dreams of becoming a marine biologist one day. She told me how hard it had been to move from one foster home to another, always feeling like an outsider. "They were nice to me, most of them," she said one day. "But it's not the same as family, you know?" I nodded, my heart breaking a little more with each word. "I promise you, Lisa, you won't have to feel like an outsider anymore." As I navigated the legal and bureaucratic hurdles, I also had to deal with my family's reactions. My mom was cautiously supportive, but kept reminding me how difficult teenagers could be. Jessica, predictably, was less tactful. "Are you sure about this, Amanda?" she said during one particularly tense phone call. "Raising a kid is a lot harder than you think. You don't want to get in over your head." "I'm not asking for your opinion, Jessica," I snapped. "Lisa is my niece, and I'm not going to abandon her like you did." That shut her up, but it didn't erase the bitterness I felt. How could my family have been so heartless? Liam was my rock through it all. He helped me turn my spare room into a welcoming space for Lisa, complete with a desk for her drawing and posters of ocean animals on the walls. He even started learning about marine biology so he could talk to her about it. "If she's going to be the next Jacques Cousteau, we'd better be ready," he joked one evening as he flipped through a book about coral reefs. Lisa's caseworker eventually approved me as her guardian, and the day she moved in was one of the most emotional days of my life. When I picked her up from the foster home, she was clutching a small duffel bag, her entire life reduced to a few belongings. "Is that everything?" I asked, trying to hide my shock. She nodded. "Yeah, this is all I've got." I made a silent promise to myself that she would never feel like she had so little again. When we got to my house, Lisa was visibly overwhelmed. She wandered through the rooms, touching the furniture and looking out the windows. When she saw her new bedroom, she froze. "This is for me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "All yours," I said, smiling. She dropped her bag and ran to the bed, throwing herself onto it. "It's so soft," she said, her voice muffled by the pillow. "I've never had a bed like this before." That night, I made her favorite dinner, mac and cheese, and we talked for hours. She opened up about her time in foster care, the good and bad moments, and her fears about the future. "I'm scared you'll get tired of me," she admitted at one point. I reached across the table and took her hand. "That's never going to happen, Lisa. You're stuck with me now." Of course, the adjustment period wasn't without its challenges. Lisa had trouble trusting that I wasn't going to abandon her like others had. She tested boundaries, skipped a few homework assignments, and once even snuck out to meet a friend without telling me. But each time, I tried to approach the situation with understanding instead of anger. One night, after an argument about her sneaking out, she broke down. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I just didn't think you'd care." I hugged her tightly. "Lisa, I care more than you know. You're my family and I love you." Over time, Lisa started to believe it. She excelled in school, joined the art club, and even made a few close friends. Liam and I took her to the aquarium one weekend, and she lit up like I'd never seen before. "This is amazing," she said as she pressed her face against the glass of the shark tank. "I want to do this someday. Work with animals like this." "You will," I told her. "You can do anything you set your mind to." Taking Lisa in was the hardest thing I've ever done. but it was also the most rewarding. She went from a scared, uncertain girl to a confident, hopeful teenager with dreams and goals. And while I couldn't erase the pain of her past, I could give her a future filled with love and stability. To anyone out there wondering if they can make a difference in someone's life, trust me, you can. It's not easy, but it's worth every second. When Lisa moved in with me, I thought I was prepared. I had read all the books about raising teenagers, watched videos on trauma-informed parenting, and set up her room to make it as cozy and welcoming as possible. But nothing could have prepared me for the reality of trying to connect with a 13-year-old who had been through more than most adults could handle. Lisa was polite but distant at first. She answered my questions with one-word responses and rarely initiated conversations. At dinner, she'd pick at her food, mumble a quiet thanks, and retreat to her room as soon as the plates were cleared. I tried not to take it personally, reminding myself that trust wouldn't come overnight. One evening, about a week after she moved in, I found her sitting on her bed with her headphones on. She didn't notice me at first, so I gently knocked on the doorframe. She jumped, quickly yanking the headphones off and shoving them under her pillow. "Sorry," she muttered, not meeting my eyes. "You don't have to hide," I said, trying to sound casual. "What were you listening to?" "Just music," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, not wanting to push her. "I love music too. What kind do you like?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Stuff." It was a dead end, but it planted a seed in my mind. Music could be a way to connect with her, if I could figure out how to approach it without making her feel cornered. The next day, I started doing a little detective work. I noticed the headphones she'd hidden were connected to a battered old MP3 player, the kind I hadn't seen since the early 2000s. It was scratched and held together with duct tape, but it clearly meant a lot to her. I didn't pry, but I made a mental note to ask about it later. A breakthrough came later that week. I was cleaning the living room when I found a small stack of crumpled papers tucked between the couch cushions. They were handwritten lyrics, dark, angsty, and raw. I didn't recognize the songs, but I could tell they weren't copied from the radio. They were Lisa's. When she came home from school that afternoon, I brought it up carefully. "Hey, Lisa, I found these in the couch. Are they yours?" Her eyes widened, and she snatched the papers out of my hand. "They're nothing," she said quickly, shoving them into her backpack. "They're not nothing," I said gently. "They're really good. Did you write them?" She looked away, her cheeks flushing. "It's just something I do. It's not a big deal." "I think it's a very big deal," I said, smiling. "Do you ever sing them? Or put them to music?" Lisa shrugged. "I used to. Before." Before. That word hung in the air like a cloud, heavy with all the things she wasn't saying. I didn't push her to explain. Instead, I decided to give her space and find another way to encourage her. That weekend, I took her to a local music store. It was one of those quirky, independent places with vinyl records on the walls and shelves packed with everything from guitars to harmonicas. "I thought you might like this," I said as we walked in. Lisa looked around, her expression guarded but curious. "Why?" "I don't know," I said casually. "You seem like someone who loves music. Maybe we can find something cool." She wandered through the aisles, her fingers trailing over the instruments. At one point, she stopped in front of a small keyboard and pressed a few keys. The sound was a little off. It hadn't been tuned in ages, but I saw a flicker of interest in her eyes. "Do you want to try it?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know how to play." "You could learn," I said. "If you wanted to." She didn't respond, but she spent the rest of the visit hovering near the keyboard. I made a mental note to save up for one. It felt like a small way to show her that I cared about her passions. The following week, Lisa came home from school in a foul mood. She slammed the door to her room and refused to come out for dinner. When I knocked to check on her, she snapped, "I'm fine. Just leave me alone." I was tempted to give her space, but something told me she needed me to push a little. I grabbed my old acoustic guitar from the closet, a relic from my college days, and sat outside her door, strumming a simple tune. I wasn't great at it, but it was enough to get her attention. After a few minutes, the door cracked open. Lisa peeked out, her expression wary. "What are you doing?" "Just messing around," I said. Do you know this song? I played the opening chords of a Taylor Swift track, hoping it was something she'd recognize. To my surprise, she smiled faintly. You're doing it wrong. Show me how to do it right, I said, holding out the guitar. She hesitated, but eventually sat down beside me. I'm not good at it, she muttered, taking the guitar. You can't be worse than me, I joked. She rolled her eyes but started playing, her fingers moving tentatively over the strings. The sound was uneven, but it was clear she had some experience. Where did you learn that? I asked. My mom taught me, she said quietly. It was the first time she'd mentioned Emily since moving in. I didn't press her for details, but I could see the memory weighed on her. Well, you're better than I am, I said, trying to lighten the mood. She smirked. That's not saying much. From that day on, music became our bridge. I bought her a cheap keyboard from a thrift store, and she spent hours in her room experimenting with it. I'd often find her scribbling lyrics in her notebook or humming softly to herself. It wasn't just a hobby for her. It was a lifeline, a way to express all the emotions she couldn't put into words. One evening, she surprised me by asking, "Can I show you something?" Of course, I said. She led me to her room and sat down at the keyboard. It's not finished, she said nervously. And it's probably stupid. I doubt that, I said, sitting on the edge of her bed. She started playing a melody, haunting and beautiful, and then began to sing. Her voice was raw but full of emotion, and the lyrics were heartbreaking. It was a song about loss, about feeling invisible and unwanted. By the time she finished, I had tears in my eyes. That was incredible, I said. Lisa, you're so talented. She looked down, fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. Do you really think so? I know so, I said firmly. You have a gift. It was a turning point for us. Slowly but surely, Lisa started to open up. She told me more about her time in foster care, the good families, the bad ones, and the moments when she felt like giving up. She also talked about Emily, sharing memories of the good times before the addiction took over. It's hard to hate her, Lisa admitted one night. Even after everything. She wasn't always like that. I know, I said. And it's okay to love her and be angry at her at the same time. Lisa nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. I just don't want to be like her. You won't be, I said. You're stronger than you realize. Building trust with Lisa wasn't easy, and there were setbacks along the way. But music gave us a way to connect, and it helped her start to believe in herself again. I still have no idea what the future holds, but for now, I'm grateful that we found a way to move forward together. Taking Lisa in had been one of the hardest and most rewarding decisions of my life, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. Just as I thought things were starting to settle, my parents blindsided me in a way I never expected. One afternoon, I got a call from Lisa's caseworker, Anna, who sounded hesitant. Amanda, I need to talk to you about something, she began. We've received some concerning letters regarding your guardianship of Lisa. My heart sank. What kind of letters? They're from your parents, Anna said cautiously. They've expressed concerns about your ability to care for Lisa and have formally asked the court to reconsider her placement with you. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. Wait, what? My parents? Why would they do that? Anna sighed. They've accused you of stealing Lisa and claim you're unfit to be her guardian. I wanted to give you a heads up because this could complicate the finalization process. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents, Lisa's grandparents, were actively trying to sabotage me. I thanked Anna for letting me know and immediately called my mom. What's going on? I demanded the moment she answered. Why are you sending letters to the court about Lisa? She didn't even try to deny it. Because it's the truth, Amanda. You're not ready to raise a child. You don't understand what you're getting into. I was shaking with anger. And you do? You and Dad refused to take her in when she needed you the most. How can you stand there and criticize me for doing what you wouldn't? We're just thinking of Lisa's best interests, she said, her voice maddeningly calm. She needs stability, not someone who's playing house. Playing house? I repeated, my voice rising. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to make her feel safe and loved? She's thriving here. Mom didn't respond, and I hung up before I could say something I'd regret. But the damage was done. I knew this wasn't just a family argument. It was a legal battle now. The following week, I had to attend a hearing to address my parents' concerns. Walking into that courtroom was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. On one side, there was me, fighting to give Lisa a home. On the other side were my parents, people who were supposed to support me, actively working against me. Their lawyer, a slick man named Thomas Carrington, started by painting a picture of me as irresponsible and impulsive. "Amanda has no experience raising children," he said smoothly. "She's single, has a demanding job, and lacks the resources to provide Lisa with the stable environment she needs." I wanted to scream. Instead, I clenched my fists and waited for my turn to speak. When I finally did, I focused on the truth. "Lisa has been through more than any child should ever have to endure," I said, my voice trembling. "She deserves to be with someone who loves her and is willing to fight for her, no matter what." That's what I'm doing. And the fact that my parents would try to interfere after refusing to take her in themselves is hypocritical and cruel. The judge listened carefully to both sides before calling for a break. During the recess, I confronted my parents in the hallway. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. "What are you trying to prove?" Dad, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. "We're trying to protect Lisa. She's been through enough, and we don't think you're the right person to take care of her." "She doesn't need protection from me," I shot back. "She needs protection from people who treat her like a burden." "That's what you did when you refused to take her in." Mom looked away, but Dad held my gaze. "We're doing what we think is best." "No, you're doing what makes you feel less guilty," I said, my voice breaking. "And in the process, you're hurting her all over again." Before they could respond, Anna came to get me. The break was over. The next few weeks were a blur of court filings, meetings with lawyers, and sleepless nights. Lisa, who had overheard bits and pieces of what was happening, started pulling away from me. One evening, I found her packing a bag in her room. "What are you doing?" I asked, my stomach sinking. She wouldn't look at me. "If your parents don't want me here, maybe I should just go back to foster care." I felt tears welling up. "Lisa, no, that's not going to happen. I'm not letting you go." "But what if they're right?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I'm too much for you?" I knelt beside her and took her hands in mine. "You're not too much," I said firmly. "You're exactly where you belong. And I'm going to prove that to everyone." Slowly, she nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. It broke my heart. The turning point came when Anna testified on my behalf. She told the court about the progress Lisa had made since moving in with me, how she was doing well in school, how she'd started making friends, and how her passion for music had blossomed. "Lisa finally has a sense of stability," Anna said. "Taking her away from that now would be devastating." But the most powerful moment came when Lisa herself was called to testify. She was nervous, fidgeting with her hands as she took the stand, but when she started speaking, her voice was clear and steady. "Amanda's the first person who's ever made me feel like I mattered," she said. "She listens to me, she supports me, and she never gives up on me. I want to stay with her." There wasn't a dry eye in the room by the time she finished. Even the judge looked moved. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. My parents were ordered to cease their interference, and Lisa's guardianship was officially granted to me. The relief was overwhelming, but it was bittersweet. My relationship with my parents was in shambles, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. When we got home that evening, Lisa hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" I asked, trying not to cry. "For not giving up on me." "Never," I said. "Not in a million years." That night, as I watched Lisa playing the keyboard in her room, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. We still had a long road ahead of us, but for the first time, I felt like we could face it together. After everything we'd been through with the court battle and my parents' interference, I realized how crucial it was to make Lisa feel truly at home. She needed more than a roof over her head. She needed a space that was hers, somewhere she could feel safe, express herself, and grow. I decided to transform the spare room into something special, a place that would show her just how much she meant to me. It started with an idea that came to me during one of Lisa's impromptu keyboard sessions. She'd been sitting at the thrift store keyboard I'd bought her, creating a melody that was haunting and beautiful. Watching her play, I could see how much music meant to her. It wasn't just a hobby. It was her way of coping with everything she'd been through. That's when it hit me. I could give her more than just a room. I could give her a music studio. The next morning, I told Liam about my plan. "What do you think?" I asked. "Is it too much?" He smiled. "I think it's perfect. She'll love it." With his encouragement, I got to work. The room had been a generic guest bedroom, barely used and full of mismatched furniture. I cleared it out, repainted the walls a soft gray, and added a deep blue accent wall for a touch of creativity. Then I started shopping for the essentials: a proper keyboard, soundproofing panels, a desk, and a few shelves for her growing collection of music books. One weekend, while Lisa was at a friend's house, Liam and I spent the entire day assembling everything. He handled the technical setup, connecting the keyboard to a computer and installing software that would let her compose and record her own music. I focused on the details, adding a cozy rug, string lights, and a bulletin board where she could pin lyrics and photos. By the time we were done, the room looked like a real studio, complete with a small recording mic and headphones. When Lisa came home that evening, I led her upstairs with a grin I couldn't hide. "What's going on?" she asked, eyeing me suspiciously. "Just come and see," I said, opening the door to her new room. Her reaction was everything I'd hoped for. She stood in the doorway, her mouth slightly open, staring at the transformation. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's your studio," I said. "I thought you might like a place where you can really focus on your music." For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she turned to me, her eyes wide. "You did this for me?" "Of course," I said, smiling. "You deserve it." She stepped inside, running her fingers over the keyboard and touching the soundproof panels on the walls. "This is amazing," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I can't believe you did all this." "You can use it however you want," I said. "Write, record, experiment. It's your space." Lisa looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something I hadn't seen before: trust. "Thank you," she said softly. Over the next few weeks, the studio became her sanctuary. I'd often find her in there after school, lost in her music. She started experimenting with different styles. Sometimes it was soft and melodic, other times upbeat and experimental. One evening, she called me into the room to listen to a song she'd been working on. "I'm not finished yet," she said, sitting at the keyboard, "but I think it's getting there." I sat on the edge of her bed as she began to play. The melody was gentle but layered, and her voice, though hesitant at first, grew stronger with each verse. The lyrics were about finding a home, about finally feeling like you belong. By the time she finished, I had tears in my eyes. "That was beautiful, Lisa," I said. "You're so talented." She blushed, looking down at the keyboard. "You really think so?" "I know so," I said, "and I'm so proud of you." The studio didn't just bring out her creativity, it also brought us closer together. One night, as we were cleaning up after dinner, she started humming a tune under her breath. "Is that a new song?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, I've been working on it in the studio. Want to show me?" She hesitated, then said, "Okay, but only if you promise not to laugh." "Deal," I said, holding up my hands. We spent the next hour in her studio, going through the melody and brainstorming ideas for lyrics. It became a regular thing, late-night jam sessions where we'd laugh, experiment, and share stories. For the first time, I felt like we were really connecting. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Lisa was still navigating the scars of her past, and sometimes the smallest thing would trigger a wave of self-doubt. One afternoon, I found her sitting in the studio with her head in her hands. "Hey," I said, sitting down beside her. "What's wrong?" She shook her head. "It's stupid." "It's not stupid if it's upsetting you," I said gently. "Talk to me." She sighed. "I was trying to write something happy, but everything I come up with just sounds fake. Like I don't know how to write about being happy." My heart ached for her. "Lisa, you've been through so much. It's okay if you're still figuring things out. Your music doesn't have to be happy. It just has to be honest." She looked at me, her eyes glassy. "What if I don't know how to be honest?" You do, I said. Every time you sit at that keyboard, you're being honest. Even if it's messy or sad or incomplete, it's still real. And that's what makes it beautiful. She didn't say anything, but later that evening, I heard her playing again. The melody was raw and unpolished, but it was hers, and that was enough. As the months went by, Lisa started to open up about other parts of her life. She told me about her time in foster care, the families who had tried their best and the ones who hadn't. She talked about her mom, Emily, and how much she missed the person she used to be. She taught me how to play the guitar, Lisa said one night, her voice tinged with sadness. It was one of the only things we ever did together. I didn't know that, I said. Do you still play? Not really, she said. I don't have one. The next day, I went out and bought her a guitar. It wasn't fancy, but when I handed it to her, the look on her face made it worth every penny. Are you sure? She asked, cradling it like it was made of glass. Positive, I said. It's yours. She spent the next few weeks relearning chords and practicing songs she remembered from her childhood. One night, she played a duet with Liam, who had dusted off his own guitar for the occasion. Watching them laugh and play together, I felt a surge of hope. Lisa wasn't just surviving, she was starting to thrive. Our bond grew stronger with each passing day. We weren't just guardian and ward anymore. We were family. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were both exactly where we were meant to be. When I decided to fight for Lisa's custody, I knew it wouldn't be easy. What I didn't anticipate was just how much it would take out of me. Financially, emotionally, and even physically. The legal system was a labyrinth I wasn't prepared to navigate, but I knew that Lisa was worth every ounce of effort. The process began with a mountain of paperwork. I had to submit detailed records of my income, my living situation, my relationship history. Everything about my life was laid bare for the court to scrutinize. It was invasive, exhausting, and, frankly, humiliating at times. But I knew it was just the beginning. The first major blow came when I received the estimated legal fees. My lawyer, a sharp but compassionate woman named Angela Perkins, walked me through the numbers during our first meeting. Custody cases like this can be incredibly drawn out, she warned. You're looking at a minimum of $20,000. But if things get contentious, it could easily double. I nearly choked on my coffee. 40,000? I repeated, incredulous. I don't have that kind of money. Angela nodded sympathetically. I understand, but these cases can get messy. The other party, whether it's your parents or the state, will likely push back hard. I left her office that day feeling more overwhelmed than ever. I had some savings, but nowhere near enough to cover the potential costs. Liam, ever the optimist, tried to reassure me. We'll figure it out, he said. We can cut back, maybe take out a loan if we need to. Liam, this isn't just groceries or a car payment, I said, my voice shaking. This is everything I have. And Lisa is worth it, he said firmly. We'll make it work. His confidence gave me the push I needed to move forward. I started budgeting like my life depended on it, because, in a way, it did. I canceled my streaming subscriptions, sold some old furniture, and even started taking on freelance work in the evenings. Every spare dollar went into my legal fund. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. The first court hearing was a wake-up call. My parents, who had already tried to derail my guardianship with their letters, came prepared with a lawyer, a smug, middle-aged man named Richard Keller. Richard wasted no time attacking my character, painting me as an impulsive, inexperienced woman who was ill-equipped to raise a teenager. She has no children of her own, he argued, pacing in front of the judge. Her life has been built around her own needs and desires, not those of a child. Lisa deserves a guardian who understands the complexities of parenting, not someone who is using this situation to fill a void in her life. I wanted to leap out of my chair and scream at him, but Angela had warned me to keep my composure. Instead, I gripped the edge of the table and focused on breathing. When it was her turn, Angela calmly dismantled Richard's arguments, highlighting the progress Lisa had made since moving in with me. Lisa has thrived under Amanda's care, Angela said, her voice steady and confident. She has a stable home, access to education, and, most importantly, someone who genuinely loves and supports her. This isn't about Amanda filling a void. It's about Lisa finding the stability and care she's needed for years. The judge listened intently, but it was clear this was only the beginning. Over the next several months, the case dragged on. There were home inspections, psychological evaluations, and more court hearings than I could count. Each step came with its own set of challenges and expenses. At one point, I was asked to attend a mediation session with my parents. The goal was to find common ground, but it quickly devolved into a blame game. My mom accused me of being reckless, while my dad claimed I was trying to erase Emily's memory by taking over as Lisa's guardian. That's not what this is about, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is about Lisa. She needs a home, and I'm giving her one. And what happens when you get bored or overwhelmed? My mom shot back. What happens to Lisa then? I won't, I said firmly, because I love her. It was a brutal session that left me emotionally drained. By the end, it was clear that mediation wasn't going to resolve anything. The financial strain was relentless. Between attorney fees, court costs, and expert evaluations, the expenses piled up faster than I could manage. I maxed out my credit cards and even borrowed money from Liam's savings, something I swore I'd never do. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was in over my head. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered Lisa. I thought about the way she lit up when she played her keyboard, the way she laughed when we stayed up late watching cheesy movies, the way she hugged me tightly after a tough day at school. She wasn't just a responsibility, she was my family. The case reached a turning point when Lisa was called to testify. I was terrified for her. She was only 13, and the idea of her standing in front of a courtroom full of adults made me sick to my stomach. But Lisa insisted on speaking for herself. I want to stay with Amanda, she said, her voice steady despite the nerves I knew she must have felt. She's the only person who's ever made me feel like I have a real home. I love her, and I know she loves me. Her words brought tears to my eyes. Even Richard Keller, my parents' lawyer, seemed momentarily taken aback. But he quickly regained his composure and tried to discredit her testimony, suggesting that I had influenced her opinion. Lisa, has Amanda ever told you what to say? He asked, his tone sharp. Lisa shook her head. No, she just listens to me. That's all. It was a simple answer, but it carried more weight than anything else that had been said in the courtroom. The final hearing was nerve-wracking. Angela presented a compelling case, backed by expert testimonies and evidence of Lisa's progress since moving in with me. Richard, on the other hand, relied on tired arguments about my lack of experience and the supposed instability of my life. When the judge finally gave her ruling, it felt like the world stopped. After careful consideration, I find that Amanda has demonstrated a clear commitment to Lisa's well-being, she said. Her actions have shown not only a willingness but an ability to provide Lisa with the stability and care she needs. Therefore, I am granting full guardianship to Amanda. The relief was overwhelming. I felt like I could finally breathe again. Lisa hugged me tightly, and for the first time in months, I saw hope in her eyes. That night, we celebrated with pizza and ice cream. It was a small, simple celebration, but it meant everything to us. As we sat on the couch, Lisa turned to me and said, "Thank you for fighting for me." "Always," I said, smiling through tears. "You're worth it." The custody battle had cost me over $40,000, countless sleepless nights, and more stress than I thought I could handle. But as I watched Lisa laugh and joke with Liam that night, I knew it had all been worth it. Life after the custody battle felt like a new chapter for both Lisa and me. For the first time in a long while, we could finally breathe without the constant weight of uncertainty. Lisa's room, with its makeshift music studio, became her sanctuary. Every evening after homework, she would retreat there, tinkering with melodies on her keyboard or scribbling lyrics in her notebook. Watching her thrive in that space was a joy I couldn't have imagined a year earlier. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, Lisa called out from her room. "Amanda, come here. I want to show you something." I set down the dish towel and hurried upstairs. When I walked in, she was sitting at her keyboard, looking both excited and nervous. "I wrote a new song," she said, her fingers hovering over the keys. "It's different from what I usually do. I smiled. Let's hear it. She took a deep breath and started playing. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, but there was an edge to it, something raw and electric that made my heart race. Her voice, soft but steady, carried the lyrics like a story being unraveled. It was a song about hope, about finding light in the darkest places. By the time she finished, I was blinking back tears. Lisa, that was incredible, I said, clapping. You just keep getting better. She grinned, her cheeks flushing with pride. Do you really think so? I know so, I said. You've got a gift. A few days later, I came across a flyer for a local song contest. It was open to anyone between the ages of 12 and 18, with the winner getting a chance to perform at the upcoming city festival. I showed it to Lisa that evening. What do you think? I asked. Want to give it a shot? Her eyes widened as she read the flyer. You think I could do it? Absolutely, I said. Your song is amazing, Lisa. You should share it with the world. She hesitated, biting her lip. What if they don't like it? They will, I said. And even if they don't, what matters is that you're brave enough to put yourself out there. After a few moments, she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Lisa practiced her song every evening, fine-tuning the melody and perfecting the lyrics. Liam, ever supportive, helped her set up a simple recording so she could listen back and make adjustments. You're going to blow them away, he said, giving her a thumbs up. The day of the contest arrived, and the energy in the auditorium was electric. Dozens of young performers were buzzing with excitement, their families cheering them on from the audience. Lisa was quiet as we waited backstage, clutching her notebook like a lifeline. Are you nervous? I asked. She nodded. What if I mess up? You won't, I said, squeezing her hand. But even if you do, just keep going. You've worked so hard for this, Lisa. Enjoy it. When her name was called, she took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, and the audience was a sea of faces, but she didn't waver. Sitting at the keyboard, she started to play. The first notes filled the auditorium, and the room fell silent. As she sang, I could see the transformation happening. The nervous girl who had walked onto the stage was gone, replaced by a confident young artist pouring her heart into every word. By the time she hit the final note, the audience erupted into applause. I was on my feet, clapping so hard my hands hurt. When the winners were announced, I held my breath. And the first place prize goes to Lisa Matthews. Lisa's eyes went wide, and for a moment, she looked like she couldn't believe it. Then she turned to me, her face lighting up with pure joy. I hugged her tightly. You did it, I said, laughing through my tears. I'm so proud of you. Winning the contest was a turning point for Lisa. It wasn't just about the prize. It was about believing in herself, something she'd struggled with for so long. The organizers of the contest invited her to perform at the city festival, which was set to take place in just a few weeks. It was a huge opportunity, and Lisa threw herself into preparing for it. The festival was a massive event, drawing people from all over the city. On the day of the performance, the stage was set up in the middle of the park, surrounded by food trucks, craft booths, and hundreds of spectators. Lisa was one of the final acts, which meant she had plenty of time to watch the other performers, and to let the nerves set in. What if I'm not as good as the others? She asked as we waited backstage. Lisa, you're going to be amazing, I said. Just focus on the music. That's what matters. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage with a quiet determination. The crowd cheered as she sat at the keyboard, adjusting the mic. Then she began to play. The song was even more powerful than the first time I'd heard it. Her voice soared over the crowd, drawing everyone in. By the time she finished, there was a standing ovation. People were shouting her name, clapping and cheering like she was a star. After the performance, a man in a sharp suit approached us. "Excuse me," he said, extending his hand. "I'm James Carter, a producer at Radiant Records. Lisa, you were incredible up there." Lisa looked stunned. "Thank you," she stammered. "I'd love to talk to you about your music," he said. "Have you ever thought about recording professionally?" I could see the wheels turning in her head. I don't know," she said honestly. "Well, if you're interested, "Here's my card," James said, handing it to her. "No pressure, but you've got real talent. I'd hate to see it go unnoticed." After he left, Lisa turned to me, her eyes wide. "Did that really just happen?" "It did," I said, grinning. "Lisa, this is just the beginning." That night, as we celebrated with Liam and a few close friends, Lisa couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in a long time, she seemed genuinely happy, like she was starting to believe in herself and her future. Watching her thrive was the greatest reward I could have asked for. She'd come so far from the withdrawn, uncertain girl who had first come into my life. And as she sat at the keyboard, playing snippets of new melodies and laughing with her friends, I knew she was finally home. Life was starting to settle into a rhythm for Lisa and me, but it seemed like every step forward came with new challenges. Lisa had been doing well at home, especially after her music contest win, but school was another story. It started with subtle comments and snickers from a few of her classmates, but it quickly escalated. One evening, Lisa came home unusually quiet. Normally, she'd head straight to her studio to work on her music, but that night, she barely touched her dinner and spent the evening in her room. I knocked softly on her door, waiting for her muffled "come in" before stepping inside. She was lying on her bed, scrolling aimlessly on her phone. "Lisa, is everything okay?" I asked, sitting down at the edge of her bed. She shrugged, not looking up. "It's nothing." "It doesn't look like nothing," I said gently. "You can talk to me." For a long moment, she was silent. Then she sighed and said, "Some kids at school found out I was in foster care. Now they won't stop talking about it." My heart sank. "What are they saying?" "They're just being jerks," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Calling me a charity case, saying I don't belong here. Stuff like that." I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my tone calm. "Lisa, I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. You don't deserve any of it." She wiped her eyes quickly, trying to hide her tears. "It's fine. I don't care." But I could tell she did care, more than she wanted to admit. Over the next few weeks, the bullying continued. Lisa became more withdrawn, and her usual spark dimmed. She stopped playing music as much, and her grades started slipping. I knew I had to do something. One night, after a particularly rough day at school, Lisa finally broke down. "I hate it there," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to go back." That was all I needed to hear. The next day, I started looking into other schools in the area. It wasn't an easy decision. Lisa had already gone through so much change, but her mental health and happiness were my priority. After weeks of research, phone calls, and meetings, I found a school with a strong arts program that seemed like a good fit. It was smaller than her current school, with a focus on fostering creativity and individuality. When I told Lisa about it, she seemed hesitant at first. "What if it's the same there?" she asked. "It won't be," I said firmly. "And even if it is, we'll face it together." "You're not alone in this, Lisa." She nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Transferring schools wasn't the only step I took. I also reached out to a psychologist who specialized in working with teens who had experienced trauma. Her name was Dr. Evelyn Harper, and from the moment I met her, I knew she was the right person to help Lisa. She had a warm, calming presence and a way of making you feel understood without judgment. Lisa was reluctant at first. "I don't need therapy," she said when I brought it up. "I'm fine." "I know you're strong, Lisa," I said, "but you've been through a lot, and it's okay to get help. Dr. Harper isn't here to judge you. She just wants to listen." After some coaxing, Lisa agreed to give it a try. The first few sessions were rough. She was guarded and resistant, but Dr. Harper was patient. Over time, Lisa started to open up, sharing pieces of her story that even I hadn't heard before. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but little by little, I could see her starting to heal. Meanwhile, my relationship with my extended family continued to deteriorate. My parents and Jessica were relentless in their criticism, constantly questioning my decisions and implying that I was in over my head. At first, I tried to reason with them, but it became clear that they weren't interested in understanding. They were more concerned with being right than supporting me or Lisa. One day, after a particularly nasty phone call with Jessica, I decided enough was enough. I blocked her number and told my parents I needed space. If you can't support me, then I don't want to hear from you, I said, my voice shaking. Lisa and I are doing fine without your negativity. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. Cutting ties with people who were supposed to love and support me was painful, but it gave me the clarity to focus on what really mattered. Lisa. As Lisa adjusted to her new school, she started to come back to life. The smaller classes and supportive teachers made a huge difference, and she quickly found a group of friends who shared her love of music and art. For the first time, she seemed genuinely happy to go to school. One evening, she came home buzzing with excitement. "Guess what?" she said, practically bouncing on her toes. "Miss Keller, my music teacher, said I should think about applying to music colleges." "That's amazing, Lisa," I said, pulling her into a hug. "Did she have any suggestions?" "She said Berkeley would be a good fit," Lisa said, her eyes shining. "But I don't know if I'm good enough for that." "Lisa, you're more than good enough," I said. "If that's what you want, we'll make it happen." Over the next few weeks, Lisa threw herself into planning for college. She started researching programs, practicing relentlessly, and even writing new songs for her portfolio. Seeing her so passionate and driven filled me with pride. To celebrate her progress, I decided to surprise her with a trip to the ocean. She had never been more than a few hundred miles from home, and I wanted to give her an experience she'd never forget. When I told her about the trip, her reaction was priceless. "Seriously?" she said, her eyes wide. "We're really going to the ocean?" "Seriously," I said, laughing. "You deserve it." The trip was everything I hoped it would be. As we drove down the coast, Lisa's excitement was palpable. She pressed her face to the window, taking in the endless expanse of water and the sound of waves crashing against the shore. When we finally arrived, she ran straight to the water, laughing as the waves lapped at her feet. "This is amazing," she said, her face lit up with pure joy. "I can't believe I've never done this before." We spent the weekend exploring the beach, collecting seashells, and watching the sunset over the horizon. One evening, as we sat on the sand listening to the waves, Lisa turned to me and said, "Thank you, Amanda, for everything." I felt a lump in my throat. "You don't have to thank me, Lisa," I said. "I'm just so proud of you." As we drove home, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, I felt like we were truly moving forward. Lisa was finding her voice, her confidence, and her future, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take her.